Welcome to Story S13. Tonight, we invite you to dim the lights, lie back, and let your imagination drift. In this video, you'll hear 5 eerie tales carefully chosen to stir your curiosity and quiet your thoughts. These are horror stories made for sleep, slow, mysterious, and softly haunting. Close your eyes and listen closely, because in the stillness of night, even whispers can carry shadows. Let's begin. The house that changed overnight. In the early 90s, a family of 5 moved into their brand new home in the suburbs. They had a loving husband and wife, 3 kids, a dog, and a cat, and they couldn't be happier with their big, beautiful home. It was modern, it was spacious, and it even had a pool out back. But from the first night they moved in, things were off. Nothing made sense. Every morning when the family woke up, they would notice that certain things were slightly different than the day before. Things weren't in the right place. And no matter how many times they cleaned, dusted, or rearranged things, the next morning they'd find everything exactly as it was before they changed it. "I don't know about this place," said the mother to her husband one night as she was getting ready for bed. "It feels like we're not alone." Her husband, being the rational one, scoffed at the idea. "Don't be silly, Mary. There's no one here but us. And if there is, then they're hiding very well." Their daughter, Sarah, who was only 8 years old, piped up from across the room, "Yeah, it's probably the Blueberry Monster." And while her parents laughed at her, young Sarah knew deep down inside that there was something supernatural going on in the house. One morning, Mr. Williams walked out of his office and nearly jumped out of his skin when he saw that his entire office had changed layouts overnight. He worked in sales and needed a home office to make phone calls during the day, but now he couldn't find any of his files or supplies because the entire room was different. Everything was in a new place. Even the door, which used to open and close by itself, now opened and closed properly, whatever that means. He told his wife about it, and she, of course, didn't believe him. She thought he was just making it up to get out of doing some work around the house, so she went and checked for herself. When she walked into his office, she found all of their mail laid out neatly on the desk, and for some reason, their youngest son's shoes were sitting on the bookshelf. She went downstairs to check the rest of the house and noticed that the kitchen was completely empty. No appliances, no cabinets, nothing. All they could see were 4 bare walls and a doorway. They walked through to the living room and everything was back to normal. So they decided to stay in the living room until bedtime. They spent the entire day watching TV, eating takeout food, and drinking wine. And they didn't think anything strange had happened until their oldest son came home from school and started asking where his computer was so he could do his homework. That's when they remembered the office. When they walked into the office together, their son couldn't believe his eyes. Kay's entire computer desk had vanished, and in its place was a wet bar with 2 stools. Their daughter came home later that afternoon and had the same reaction. Mrs. Williams called up the real estate agent who helped them buy the house and asked if he could send over a copy of the blueprint so they could see if the second floor was supposed to look like the second floor. The real estate agent was confused and told her that the blueprints would be useless anyway, because the house had been reconfigured several times since it was originally built. But he did offer to come over and take a look at the house himself, and the Williams family agreed. He showed up at their house the next day, took a quick look around, and told them that everything seemed fine and that he could unexplain what was happening. And just like that, he left. The Williams family didn't hear from him again for another 3 weeks. In that time, the layout of their house changed several more times. Once they even woke up and the master bedroom was on the other side of the hallway. Then one day, the real estate agent knocked on their door. He looked pale and exhausted, and he apologized profusely for not believing them earlier. He said he'd been investigating what was happening to their house, and it turns out the house was haunted by the ghost of a famous architect named Jasper Eden. Jasper had designed the house for himself back in the 1920s, but he had secretly planned for it to be reconfigured in several ways so that he could live out his final days without anyone knowing where he was. When the Williams family bought the house, they inadvertently became part of his plan. Now, every time they tried to change something in the house, whether by rearranging furniture or knocking down a wall, the ghost would shuffle the rooms around to compensate, okay? And that's why they never found anything in the right place twice. To make matters worse, the ghost was slowly poisoning them. He was causing them to lose their sense of smell, and their memories were slipping away. Eventually, the Williams family wouldn't even recognize each other. So after hearing this story, the Williams family packed up their things and left the house. They never went back to it. Hey, and now it sits abandoned and empty, waiting for someone else to move in and become part of Jasper's grand scheme. This house may look like your typical American home from the outside, but what goes on behind those closed doors will leave you questioning reality itself. It's just like the Williams family. Whoever moves into this house will slowly forget who they are and where they came from, and they'll have no one to blame but themselves. But hey, at least they won't have to worry about paying rent. And let's face it, in this economy, that's a pretty sweet deal. The night train doesn't stop anymore. When it comes to abandoned places, there are plenty of creepy ones out there, okay? But this one takes the cake for me, because deep in the woods near an abandoned village sits an old train station, and every night at exactly 3:12 a.m., it magically lights up. So naturally, I went to investigate. It was during World War II that the Japanese army would use this small village as a way station between Osaka and Kyoto. There was even a rumor that the military leader responsible for the Pearl Harbor attack used this very station before boarding his ship to Hawaii. But as the war began to turn against Japan, this station saw less and less traffic. And when the war finally ended, the entire rail line was abandoned. The tracks were ripped up and the stations were demolished. That is, all but one. And while no one really knows why this particular station was left standing, some say it was because of a last-minute clerical error. Others claim it's because of the tragic events that unfolded here. And still, others say it's just a coincidence. But they're wrong. You see, in the years since the train line was abandoned, this station has become something of a local legend. Hikers will often stumble upon it deep in the woods, and sometimes late at night, if you listen closely, you can hear a whistle echoing through the trees. Some say it's the sound of an approaching train. Others claim it's just the wind. But they're also wrong, because after hiking through the woods for hours, I finally came across the old station. It was in pretty bad shape, to be honest. The roof had caved in and the walls were covered in graffiti. But what really caught my attention was the clock tower. It read 3:12 a.m., which isn't that strange. What is strange, however, is that the clock tower hasn't worked since 1945. In fact, there have been several documented cases of people hearing the whistle and then coming to this station only to find the clock tower illuminated with its ghostly green glow. But what really makes this place so creepy is that every single witness describes seeing the same thing inside the station. There are always rows of people waiting patiently on the platform. There are businessmen holding briefcases, children in school uniforms, and even a few soldiers. Okay, they all look like they just stepped out of a time capsule. Okay, and while some of them seem happy, others appear rather distressed. In fact, one witness reported seeing a young girl sitting on a bench, crying. She looked to be around 10 or 12 years old, and she was wearing a white dress. Another witness reported seeing the exact same girl, except she was standing on the platform waiting for a train. But perhaps the most disturbing thing about this station is that no one seems to remember it ever being abandoned. If someone were to ask a local resident about it, they'd likely tell you that it was always there. It never occurred to them that the rest of the rail line was abandoned. And as far as they know, It still operates according to schedule. I even spoke to an elderly woman who lived in the village during the war, and she told me that nothing had changed. She still waits for the train every morning at 3:12 a.m., just like she did when she was a child, except now she has company. That's right, I wasn't the only person who showed up at the station that night. In fact, there were dozens of us standing on a platform, waiting for the train. And while none of us knew each other, we all seemed drawn to the same place at the same time. But by far the creepiest part of all this was what happened next. As the clock tower chimed 3:12 a.m., the train arrived. It was an old steam engine, much like the ones you'd see in an old black and white movie. And it seemed almost otherworldly as it emerged from the mist. As it pulled to a stop, the doors opened and all of the passengers disembarked. They stepped off the train one by one and began walking away. Now, it should be noted that I couldn't actually see these people, nor could anyone else. All we saw were their outlines. It was like watching a movie made of smoke. And while most of them seemed to walk off into the forest, a few approached us. One of them was a man in a business suit. He introduced himself as Mr. Suzuki, and he asked me how long I'd been waiting for the train. I told him I'd arrived just after midnight, but he didn't seem to believe me. He told me the train only comes once a year, and it only stops for those who are truly lost. Just before I could ask him what he meant, he vanished into thin air. Then a woman in a white dress approached me. She was crying, and she kept repeating, "I want to go home. I want to go home." Before I could comfort her, she too disappeared. Then suddenly, the train began moving again. It let out a loud whistle and then disappeared into the darkness. The moment that happened, everyone woke up. We were all standing on a dirt road. Behind us was the abandoned train station, and in front of us stretched a dense forest. None of us remembered getting there, and none of us knew each other. We all looked around in confusion, trying to piece together how we got there, and that's when I noticed something strange. Everyone was wearing clothes from a different time period. There were men in suits from the 1920s, women in dresses from the 1950s, and even a few kids wearing school uniforms from the 1960s. And they were all looking at me like I was an alien. I tried to speak, but my voice sounded strange. It was as if I was speaking from another time. I took a closer look at myself and realized I was wearing clothes from the 1940s. I was wearing a brown leather jacket, a white shirt, and a pair of corduroy pants. But the most disturbing part of all this was that I didn't recognize myself. I don't mean that I couldn't remember my own face. I mean that I didn't feel like myself, It was as if my soul had been trapped in a different time. I wandered through the woods for hours, hoping to find someone who could help me, but no one was around. And eventually, I came across a dirt road. I walked down the road and eventually came across a car. It was an old Volkswagen Beetle, and I don't think it had moved in decades. But as I approached it, the door opened and a little girl stepped out. She was the same girl who appeared on the train, and she looked at me and said, "Are you lost?" I nodded, and she smiled. Then she closed the car door and drove off. Now, I want to be clear that this isn't a story that I heard from someone else. This is something that happened to me, And I've been trying to find answers ever since. I've spoken to countless experts, but none of them have any answers, Some say it was a simple case of sleep paralysis, Others claim it was a hallucination brought on by stress, But I know what I experienced, and it wasn't normal. In fact, I'm convinced that there's a portal hidden in that train station. A portal that transports people to a different time, And while I don't know where that place is or how it got there, I do know that the train still runs every night at 3:12 a.m. And if you show up at the station, you might just catch it. So remember that if you do, you won't be alone. There are dozens of us waiting on that platform, all of us trapped in a never-ending loop. So if you ever find yourself lost in the woods near an abandoned train station, stay away from it. And if you hear the sound of a whistle in the night, run. Don't look back. The street that doesn't exist on maps. This is the scariest street in the world. This may look like your typical neighborhood, but there's something strange about this street. If you visit it, you'll probably never be seen again. I'm going to tell you all about this terrifying place. And by the way, this isn't the only creepy street in the world. There are actually quite a few. The first one is this street. Oh, the residents didn't like how the new high school looked, so they erased it from existence. Wait, what? So here's some more background. This image was taken in 2007. It shows a small town in Austria. If you zoom in on the buildings, you'll notice something creepy. All of these buildings have X's over their doors. Now, you might think this is some kind of Halloween decoration, but it's actually much darker than that. These people were literally hiding from the government. Back in the early 1900s, the Austrian government started building a new high school in this town. At first, the residents were happy because this would improve property values and give kids an excellent education. But then the construction crew found out that they needed to tear down a bunch of houses to make room for the school. They didn't want to do this, so they tried appealing to the government. But when that didn't work, they did something even more drastic. They pretended they didn't exist. They put up wooden boards over their doors and windows and refused to speak to anyone. Eventually, the government gave up and built the school somewhere else. To this day, no one knows what happened to these people or why they did this. Some say they just wanted to be left alone, while others say they were part of a secret cult. Moving on, we have this next street. You might think it's just a normal street, but there's a dark reason behind every building. On this street, most of the buildings look abandoned, yet there are still people living inside. That's because they're all in hiding. And they're hiding from the cartel. In Mexico, the cartels have gotten so powerful that people have to take extreme measures to hide from them. Most people will simply move to another country, but some won't do that even if it means putting their lives on hold. In this case, the residents were given an ultimatum. Either join the cartel or leave the country. For obvious reasons, none of them chose option one, so now they've chosen to hide for the rest of their lives. The Mexican government does try to help them, but there aren't enough resources to go around. Plus, these people don't want to put any innocent people in danger, so instead they live in fear every single day. Every time someone knocks on their door, they think it could be the cartel. Every time they hear a car drive by, they think it's the cartel. Okay, they can't even open their curtains because they're afraid of being watched. Living like this is extremely depressing, which is why many of them spend all their days indoors doing nothing. It's better than being outside, but it's certainly not ideal. Now, let's move on to this next street. At first glance, this looks like your typical neighborhood, but it's actually much different than it appears. See, every single house on this street was abandoned decades ago. No one has lived here since 1989, and it's not because they moved away or anything like that. It's because they were all executed. It all happened during the Civil War in El Salvador. Both sides were equally ruthless, which is why entire neighborhoods were wiped out. This was supposed to be a way to scare the population into joining their side, but instead, it just made everyone terrified. As you can see, these houses weren't doing anything. They weren't military bases or anything like that. The residents were just caught in the crossfire. After the war ended, people were too afraid to return to their homes. Instead, they built homes somewhere else or moved in with family members. To this day, no one has lived on this street. But speaking of abandoned streets, let's move on to this next one. This is a very famous street, but you've probably never heard of it. It's called Fachada de Triana. It's located in Spain. And here's some more background. This is technically an alleyway, but it's become a major tourist attraction, okay? And that's because it perfectly encapsulates the culture of Spain. For centuries, this was just an ordinary alleyway. But then the Spanish Civil War broke out, okay? The Republicans and the Nationalists were fighting over who should control Spain. It got so bad that the Nationalists bombed the city. Many people died, and entire neighborhoods were destroyed. Eventually, the Nationalists won the war. Cool, but in the process, they had destroyed everything. Fortunately, the damage wasn't permanent. Within a few years, the city was fully rebuilt. But to this day, it still has bullet holes in the walls. The people of Spain saw these bullet holes as a reminder of the war, so they kept them there. Tourists love this place because it's such a unique experience, but locals hate it because it brings back terrible memories. Now, let's move on to this next street. This looks like a nice little neighborhood, but there's a dark secret behind these houses. The residents of these houses are all missing. Some say they ran away, but I think there's something much darker going on here. In 1964, 2 boys went missing in this neighborhood. Police searched everywhere, but couldn't find them. 2 years later, another boy went missing in the exact same neighborhood. By this point, the police were getting suspicious. They decided to search all the houses on the block. That's when they made a gruesome discovery. They found 3 basements filled with bones. The police immediately arrested the homeowner, but he claimed he was innocent. He said he had found the bodies and was keeping them in his basement to honor their memory. Of course, the police didn't believe him. They knew that this guy was a serial killer, but they never caught him in the act. Because of this, the case went cold. Even today, no one knows what happened to those boys. Next, we have to talk about this place. Technically, it's not a street, but rather a whole town. This is Pompeii. It was a small Italian town until Mount Vesuvius erupted. Eruption completely destroyed the town, killing thousands. It's considered one of the deadliest natural disasters in history. For centuries, archaeologists had uncovered artifacts from this town, but in 1748, they made a shocking discovery. They found an entire street preserved in stone. The street was covered in ash, so it looked exactly the same as it did 1,000 years earlier. Since then, we've learned a lot about life in ancient Rome, but there's still so much we don't know. Because of this, the Italian government has put a lot of effort into excavating this site. But after all this time, they've only uncovered 20% of it. Who knows what secrets are still hidden beneath the ash? Maybe you'll discover something if you ever visit. But moving on, we have to talk about this next place. This is the scariest street in the world. I'll explain why. In Thailand, there's a dangerous alleyway. Locals call it the Death Alley, and that's because nearly 100 people have died there. It's not because of gang violence or anything like that. It's because of the construction. This alleyway is in Bangkok. It's incredibly narrow, just wide enough for a motorbike. Yet somehow, cars still try driving through it. I have no idea how, but I guess they squeeze through. The problem is that this alleyway is extremely slippery. During the rainy season, it becomes almost impossible to navigate. Cars will lose control and crash, sometimes falling several stories. Over the years, this alleyway has claimed many lives. Authorities have tried closing it off, but people still try driving through. Apparently, some people are just too scared to turn back. Guess that's why they call it the Death Alley. But now, it's time to make your voice heard. Comment below, which of these places was the scariest? Voices behind the mirror. The unsettling silence of the old house pressed against Eliza's ears like a physical weight. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind through the chimney sent shivers down her spine. Dust motes danced in the weak sunlight that filtered through grimy windows, illuminating the faded grandeur of a bygone era. It wasn't much, just a small room with a claw-footed bathtub and a tarnished silver hand mirror hanging on the wall. But here, when the door was locked and the heavy oak bolted shut, she felt a semblance of security, a bubble of solitude in a sea of deafening quiet. The house had been in her family for generations, but it felt alien to Eliza, a stranger in her ancestral home. She missed the comforting hum of the city, the distant sirens, the laughter from the park across the street. The mirror seemed to pulse with a sickly light, its reflection of Eliza morphing into a grotesque parody of herself, her eyes wide and vacant, her mouth a silent scream. She stumbled back, knocking over the stool beside the bath. The clatter echoed in the small room, bouncing off the cold tiles like gunshots. The creature in the mirror mirrored her movements, its twisted grin widening. Here in this dilapidated mansion, the silence was a living thing, a constant, heavy presence. "I'm here, Eliza," it whispered, its tone a mixture of honey and venom. "I've been here all along." Eliza barely remembered to eat, her thoughts consumed by the incessant whispering, the taunting, the promises, the threats. The line between reality and madness blurred, dissolved. She would embrace the madness, step through the looking glass, and into the unknown. The voice sang to her, promising wonders beyond imagining. Eliza reached out, her fingers trembling, and touched the cold glass. Maybe there, in that strange, distorted world, she would find peace, find solace. It moved towards Eliza, its form solidifying, becoming more distinct with each step. Fear, raw and primal, surged through Eliza. She tried to speak, to call out for help, but her voice was gone, stolen by the very entity that had come for her. Images flashed before her eyes, a kaleidoscope of color and chaos. Then, everything went black. When Eliza woke, she was lying on the cold stone floor of the bathroom. Inside, the creature in the mirror reveled in its victory, its essence seeping into the very fabric of the house, becoming one with the dust and the shadows, the silence and the screams. The mirror was gone, vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a tarnished sliver of metal and a whisper of regret. It was a conduit to a realm where the boundaries of reality were thin, where the whispers of the damned echoed through eternity. And now it had claimed another victim for its dark and twisted game. "Hello, Eliza," it rasped, its voice a grating echo of her own. "I've been waiting for you." Maybe she would find someone, anyone, to ease the crushing loneliness that had become her constant companion. She was trapped, frozen in a nightmare from which there was no waking. "Don't go, Eliza. Stay with me." Dusty trunks sat like silent sentinels, guarding secrets best left undisturbed. She saw glimpses of other worlds in its depths, worlds where trees bled and rivers flowed uphill, where the sky was a bruised purple and the earth a sickly yellow. But she was no longer alone. Something or someone was watching her from the darkness, waiting. Worlds where she was not alone. Cobwebs brushed against her skin, sending tiny insects skittering for cover. The air was thick with the scent of decay, of things long dead and forgotten. "You are mine now, Eliza," it murmured, its breath a chilling caress against her cheek. "We are one." Her bare feet pounded on the hardwood floor, each step taking her further into the shadowy recesses of her mind. "Okay, are you alone?" it whispered. Eliza froze, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. Alone, was she? She looked around the stark bathroom, at the dusty towels in a rack, the chipped enamel of the sink, cobwebs decorating the corners. No one else was there. Or were they? Eliza huddled in the corner, her breath coming in ragged gasps, trying to quell the pounding of her heart, trying to silence the voice that now echoed inside her own mind. She wandered aimlessly through the cavernous rooms, their emptiness echoing her own loneliness. The mirror shimmered, not with the light from the overhead gas lamp, but with an eerie, otherworldly glow. Fear turned Eliza's blood to ice water, yet she couldn't tear her gaze away from the spectacle before her. Then she found it, the one place she could bear to be, the one room that held the faintest echo of life, the bathroom. It was here, in this cramped space, that she would spend hours, sometimes days, lost in her own thoughts, far from the prying eyes and judgmental whispers of the outside world. The mirror on the wall became her only companion, its cold, unblinking surface reflecting back at her the pale, gaunt face of a girl who was losing her grip on reality. One day, as she stared into the depths of its glass, something extraordinary happened. Then a voice, soft yet distinct, echoed inside her skull. The voice spoke again, closer now, as if the words were being breathed directly into her ear. "Do you want to be alone?" Panic clawed at Eliza's throat, squeezing the breath from her lungs. Eliza fled, bolting from the bathroom, racing through the labyrinthine corridors of the house, the voice echoing behind her, taunting, cajoling. She hid in the one place she hadn't dared venture before, the attic. Key, in the dim light, shadows stretched and distorted, taking on a life of their own. But the voice wouldn't be denied, seeped into her thoughts, worming its way into her soul. Days turned into weeks, the outside world fading into a distant memory. The bathroom mirror became her obsession, the portal to another realm, a gateway to madness. One night, under the sickly glow of the full moon, Eliza made a decision. She returned to the bathroom, her sanctuary, her prison. The mirror shimmered, beckoning. The world fractured, splintered. The room was silent now, the oppressive quiet pressing in on her, suffocating her. A shadow detached itself from the gloom, taking shape in the meager light filtering through the window. It loomed over her, a towering figure wreathed in darkness, its eyes burning like twin embers in the gloom. Eliza wanted to scream, to thrash, to break free from the paralysis that gripped her limbs, but she couldn't. The figure reached out, its touch icy cold, and traced the lines of her face. With a final shudder, the last vestiges of resistance leaving her body, Eliza succumbed to the darkness, her cries of despair swallowed by the hungry silence of the old house. Outside, the wind moaned through the chimney, a lonely lament for a lost soul. For in this house of whispers, where the past refused to stay buried, the mirror was more than glass and silver. The numbers she keeps whispering. A man was puzzled by his daughter's behavior. He found her mumbling some weird numbers every time she slept. The first number that came out of her mouth was 1943. He had no idea what it meant, but he decided not to worry about it. Then she woke up, looked around in confusion for a bit, and went back to sleep without even remembering what she had said. This continued for several nights, each with its own number. The girl would wake up confused and then fall back asleep after saying random years. He assumed his daughter had been watching some old TV show or movie and dreamed about it afterward. But every time he was about to say something, the girl would suddenly say another number, and he had to stop. Searched for those numbers on Google, but the only result was the year 1943, which said that it was the year World War II ended. So you were just dreaming about it, and that's why you said those numbers. She watched him go and whispered, "Wait, I haven't finished yet." He paused at the door and turned back. After Helen Viola died in 1987, I learned about Elizabeth I, who died in 1603. Then I read about Mary, Queen of Scots, who died in 1587. Next, I learned about Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII's second wife, who died in 1536. And finally, I researched Lady Jane Grey, who died in 1554. These are the numbers I've been saying in my sleep, but I don't remember doing it. He saw a wild look in her eyes and knew she wasn't making it up. He couldn't believe his little girl was so into history, but he loved seeing her passionate about something. He had no idea how she could have those kinds of dreams every night, but he didn't want to question it. Instead, he just nodded and said, "That sounds interesting." He woke her up again and asked, "What do these numbers mean to you?" She kept saying those numbers in her sleep for years. Even when she became a teenager, the numbers changed, but she kept whispering them in her sleep. But he couldn't help but feel a little concerned about his daughter's obsession with death. He didn't want to scare her, so he changed the subject and went back to bed. She opened her eyes and replied, "Those are the years of some important discoveries and events in history." 1941. He woke her up and asked, "What do these numbers mean to you?" She yawned and replied, "Those are the years of some significant world events." The American Civil War began in 1861. World War I started in 1914. World War II began in 1939. In that same year, the Soviet Union was invaded. I guess those are the numbers I was saying. Christopher Columbus reached the Americas in 1492. James Fort, the first permanent English settlement in North America, was founded in 1607. Then, in 1776, the United States declared independence from Britain. Finally, in 1865, slavery was abolished in the United States. I guess those are the numbers I was saying. Maybe you should write a story about it sometime. What do you mean? I haven't finished telling you about all the people I say in my sleep. There are more. Smiled and nodded. All those great women throughout history, it must have been hard to live in their time. Oh, that's just typical for her. She loves watching documentaries about historical events. It's no surprise she talks about it in her sleep. That's incredible, honey. You must have watched so many documentaries. I have, she admitted. She seemed to sense his sadness and said, "Don't worry, Dad. I'm fine. I just wish I could meet one of them, though. I wonder what they were really like. I'm sure they were all very different, just like you and me. Of course. Go ahead, sweetheart." Now he knew what was happening. His daughter was just interested in history, and she talked about it in her sleep. "What are these numbers, honey?" She opened her eyes slowly. "What? Oh, I was just dreaming about some historical events." "Like what?" "Okay. Well, I was thinking about the assassination of President James Garfield in 1881. Then I remembered the Russian Revolution of 1904. After that, I thought about the sinking of the Titanic in 1911. And finally, I learned about the death of Marilyn Monroe in 1955. I guess those are the numbers I was saying. It was just a phase that would pass, he thought. But why did you stop right before saying 1987? The girl shrugged. "I don't know. I just stopped because I fell asleep." Her father thought for a moment, then smiled. "So it seems like you just like reading about history, especially about strong women." "Yeah, I do." "Well, I guess that's not a bad thing. It's good to learn about our past, don't you think?" "Yeah." As for 1987, nothing appeared. He searched for other combinations, but there was nothing. 1943, 1987, she mumbled as she slept. "What is this all about?" the father asked himself. However, the next night she started doing it again, this time saying the number 1987, concerned about his daughter's health. The father called his wife to tell her what was going on. He sat down on the edge of the bed and watched over his sleeping daughter until the morning. When she woke up, she looked at him and asked, "Why did you come in here?" "I want to ask you something important," he replied. "You were saying some strange numbers in your sleep. What are they?" He didn't know what to do, so he turned to the internet to find an answer. One night, the father couldn't take it anymore. He wanted answers. She looked confused for a moment. "Numbers? I don't know what you're talking about. Did I say anything?" "Yes, you keep saying these numbers every night, but you never finish them. Why?" The girl still looked confused, but when she saw the desperation on her father's face, She finally agreed to talk about it. Okay, I'll tell you, but please don't get mad at me. I won't. Tell me what's going on. Well, I was reading a book about ancient Egypt, and one of the chapters was about Cleopatra. She died in 30 BC, and then I read about Genghis Khan, who died in 1227. After that, I learned about Ivan the Terrible, who died in 1584. And finally, I researched a bit about the last official Civil War widow, Helen Viola, who died in 1987. Those are the numbers I say in my sleep, but I don't remember saying them. Her father nodded slowly, trying to make sense of it all. He ruffled her hair and left the room. She took a deep breath and continued. He listened patiently, and when she finished, he felt sad for her. He hugged her and left the room again. However, the next night he heard her say, 1881, 1904, 1927, 1955. Confused, he woke her up. He looked at his daughter and realized she wasn't lying. She smiled and returned to sleep. He watched her for a few more minutes, then got up to make some coffee. In the morning, he told his wife what happened, and she laughed. One night, he heard his daughter say, 1492, 1607, 1776, 1865. He looked at his daughter and shook his head in disbelief. Could she know so much about history? He hugged her and thought to himself, it's just a phase that will pass. But it never did. When she turned 18, he heard her say, 1861, 1914, 1939. He looked at his daughter and smiled. She was right. Those were important years in history. But every night, he heard her say those strange numbers in her sleep. And so, the stories fade into silence. Thank you for spending this quiet hour with us here on Stories 13. If these tales kept you company or led you gently into sleep, consider subscribing for more nightly journeys. There's always another story waiting, okay? Just beyond the edge of the dark. Until next time, sleep well, and dream deeper.